My name is Mara Delgado, and I'm 45 years old. I've lived in this pale yellow bungalow on East 11th Street in Austin for almost 7 years, paying $1,200 a month in rent and keeping my head above water on my modest salary as a community health nurse. I've scraped by, trimmed every budget fat, and taken pride in making this place, these peeling hardwood floors, the tiny back porch where I grow tomatoes, feel like home. But home doesn't feel like home this morning. Home feels like a trap. I found out at exactly 7:03 a.m. when I shuffled into the kitchen in my worn-out terry cloth robe to make coffee and noticed the landlord's notice taped to the fridge door. It was printed on a single sheet of white paper, stark and bold. Effective July 1st, your rent will increase by 70%. 70%. That's an extra $840 a month. An extra $840 I don't have. I stared at the notice as if it were a stranger's face, trying to will it away. The paper trembled in my hand, and I almost dropped it onto the cracked linoleum floor. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would punch through my ribs. Otherwise, the house was eerily quiet, no hum of the fridge, no morning traffic on the street, no neighbor's car backing out of the driveway. Even the birds were silent, withholding their cheery chirps as if they, too, were stunned by the greed written in black ink. I don't know how long I stood there. 10 seconds? A minute? I only know that when I finally blinked, the words hadn't changed. They were as cold and unfeeling as the iron bars of a cell. I poured my coffee, letting it go bitter and black, and gripped the mug until my knuckles turned white. The steam curled around my face, but it burned like acid. My mind raced through calculations. $1,200 plus $840 equals $2,040. I make $3,200 a month before taxes. My utilities run about $150. Car payment, insurance, groceries, barely enough left for the barest essentials. Where would I find an extra $800 a month? A second job? I'm on call 3 nights a week already. Babysitting? Elder care? I can't even cover my own rent. Anger rose first, hot and scalding. Then came the shame, like a cold wave knocking me off balance. Shame that I'd let someone treat me like this. Shame that I'd bend over and pay it. Shame that I might lose the one place I'd made my home. But I refused to be shamed. I refused to kneel. I marched to my bedroom, yanked open the bottom drawer of my dresser, and pulled out the box I hadn't touched in years. Inside lay a rat's nest of thoughts and possibilities, old magazines on tenants' rights, printed articles on Austin rent control debates, notes from community meetings I'd organized. I'd started that box 7 years ago, when my first rent hike pushed my anxiety through the roof, literally. I'd thought back then I could tackle it on my own, and I'd made a few timid calls to city council members, scribbled complaint letters I never mailed. But life moved fast, and the box went from urgent to someday. This morning I hadn't planned to go digging through old regrets, but there it was, my chance to right wrongs I'd let slip through my fingers. I slapped the lid shut on the box and strode back into the kitchen, trembling with outrage and a fierce kind of purpose. I typed out a quick text to my closest neighbor, Carlos, who lives 2 doors down. We've waved and nodded for years, but never had more than a few polite words exchanged over our shared fence. I wrote, "Rent spiked 70% overnight. I'm organizing tenants. Join me." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I flopped into my dining room chair and buried my face in my hands. The first wave hit me, pure disbelief, like I was reading someone else's email. The second wave was a tidal pull of practicality. How would I pay this? Where would I go if I couldn't? Could I afford movers? Could I swallow my pride and crash with friends or couch surf? Could I let my landlord kick me out? No, I couldn't do that. Wouldn't. After the turmoil, something settled inside me. A resolve. A quiet, terrible resolve that rattled through my bones. If I had to, I would fight. I would not leave. They would not break me. The notion of fight wasn't an abstract idea. It was concrete. Postcards to neighbors, a petition circulated door to door, a meeting in the backyard at dusk, flyers taped to utility poles, calls to local media, social media firestorms, maybe even legal action. I could taste the adrenaline, sharp, metallic, intoxicating. My hands went clammy but steady. I pulled my laptop onto the table and opened a new document. Title: Tenant Solidarity. Bullet points: identify all tenants in building and block. Draft petition. Set up group text. Contact tenant union. Research legal aid. Arrange first meeting. I typed with deliberate strokes, my breathing evening out. Each click of the keys was a small rebellion. I paused, looking around the kitchen that had been my sanctuary for so long. The faded floral curtains, the chipped mug with the blue rim, the calendar on the wall marking last week's puppy adoption event. Everything I'd built here, everything I'd trusted would remain mine, was suddenly at risk. I let that vulnerability fuel me. If this landlord thought I'd roll over and pay whatever he demanded, he'd miscalculated. He chose the wrong tenant to toy with. There was a flicker of irony in knowing that I, a nurse whose job was to heal wounds and calm fears, was now steeling myself for battle. I thought of my patients, single mothers, working artists, service workers, people who came to me terrified of illness and poverty. I would be their example. No matter how late the night, no matter how steep the price, we could stand together. A hand tapped on my shoulder, my own hand, fingernails tapping lightly against my skin, reminding me why I was here in the first place. The fight wasn't abstract, it was deeply personal. It was for the right to stay put in the neighborhood I'd come to love, to keep the connections I'd forged in community clinics, to honor the sacrifices I'd made to call this small house mine. I printed a copy of the notice and my bullet point plan. I tucked them into a manila folder, clipped the edges with a binder clip, and slipped it into my canvas tote bag. Tomorrow morning I'd knock on doors. Tonight I'd get enough rest to make my voice heard. I poured one last cup of coffee, black as midnight, and drank it slowly, savoring the bitterness that matched the moment. I don't know exactly how this will turn out. I don't know if the landlord will back down, or if the city will step in, or if there's a loophole in the lease that can be exploited. But I know one thing for certain: I will not pay that price. I will not cower. I will not go quietly into that good night of exploitation. So here I am, on the cusp of something dangerous and electrifying. I'm Mara Delgado, 45, standing in my kitchen at dawn, resolute and unbowed. And tomorrow, the real work begins. Part 2. I woke before sunrise the next morning, my insides humming with restless energy. The manila folder lay on the kitchen table, its contents waiting like battle plans. I dressed in jeans and a worn leather jacket, sturdy armor for the day ahead, and slipped my canvas tote over my shoulder. The sky was pale gray, the air still cool. I breathed deeply, tasting determination. Today, I would mobilize my neighbors. Door number 1 was Mrs. Patel, an elderly woman who lived alone 2 doors down. I knocked firmly and waited. Inside, the foyer light flicked on, and she opened the door, her eyes narrowing. "Good morning, Mrs. Patel." "I'm Mara, from next door," I said, my voice calm but urgent. I offered her a warm smile. "Did you see this notice on your fridge?" I held up the printed rent hike notice. She blinked at it, confusion crossing her face. "My rent." "What?" she whispered. 70%, I said. "Starting next month." Her hands trembled around the edge of the door. "Oh my, no, that can't be right." "I know," I said softly. "But it is. I'm organizing a tenants meeting tonight at 6 in my backyard. I'd like you to come." I slid a small flyer from my bag. "We'll talk about what we can do together." She bit her lip, glancing back down the hallway. "Hi, I'll come," she said after a long moment. Door number 2 was the Martinez family, Jose, his wife Elena, and their 2 boys. I caught Jose outside, loading his truck for work. He tensed when he saw me. "Morning, Mara," he said with a nod, avoiding eye contact. "Hey, Jose. Quick question, did you get this?" I tapped the folder against my hip and he stared. Then his jaw clenched. "I heard nothing." "That's impossible." "Take a look," I said, handing him a copy. His wife stepped out, wiping coffee grounds from her fingertips. They read, word by word. When they finished, Elena's face paled. "We have 3 kids," she said. "How can we afford that?" Jose slammed his palm against the truck bed. "This is extortion." I placed a steady hand on his arm. "Exactly. But we can stop it if we stand together. Please join us tonight. We need every tenant." He looked into my eyes and saw something. Hope? Or resolve? He nodded once. "We'll be there." By mid-morning, I'd knocked on every door in the complex. Some tenants were skeptical. "I'll just pay it," a few said, shaking their heads. Others looked worried, but agreed to come. Out of 14 units, I'd secured 7 confirmations. Better than half. Enough to make noise. I used the lull at lunchtime to draft an email to the local tenants union, copying the city's renters advocacy hotline and a community legal aid clinic. I laid out the facts, attached the rent notice, and requested guidance. I hit send and prayed for a prompt response. By 2 o'clock, my inbox pinged. The tenant union rep, a fiery young lawyer named Callie, wrote back, "This is outrageous. We can help you file for an injunction against unfair rent hikes under Austin's current rent stabilization ordinance. Please call me before 4. I jotted her number on a post-it and stuck it to my laptop. Between knockings and emails, I scrawled notes. Who lived where? Their lease dates, their concerns. I updated my bullet points. Call Callie. Prepare petition. Print more flyers. Text support group. Arrange chairs for meeting. My phone buzzed. "Carlos, 2 doors down. Count me in. Meet at yours at 6. Another neighbor texted, "Thanks for the flyer. I'll try to make time." A handful more responded affirmatively. At AT4, I dialed Callie. She answered with practiced warmth. "Mara? I reviewed your case. The landlord is violating Section 801.03 of the Austin Code. We should file a temporary restraining order to halt the increase while we challenge it. But we need evidence. Copies of all tenants' leases, signed affidavits from at least 5 affected tenants, and documented communications. Can you get that tonight?" "Yes," I said, my pulse spiking. "At least 5 affidavits, leases, communications. Good. I'll prepare the paperwork. Meanwhile, collect statements and lease copies. You'll need to go door to door tonight." I hung up and exhaled. A temporary restraining order. That sounded serious. Real. The landlord wouldn't be able to raise a finger. But first, I had to gather the troops. By 5, I'd set up folding chairs in my backyard beneath the oak tree, lined them in a rough semicircle, and placed a small table with pens, paper, and tubs of iced water. I clipped a few battery-powered lights to the fence for when dusk fell. Everything was readied at AT6 sharp. Feet crunched on gravel. Carlos arrived first, carrying his guitar case, an odd touch, but he grinned. "Thought we might lighten the mood if things get tense," he said. Next came Mrs. Patel, clutching her knitting bag. Jose and Elena followed, their 2 boys trailing behind, curiosity in their eyes. Then 2 more reluctant tenants, one a young couple who whispered anxiously, the other a single father pushing a stroller. I stood in front of them, the stack of flyers in one hand, the printed rent notice in the other. My heart thudded, but my voice rang clear. "Thank you all for coming," I began, counting the faces. 7. Exactly the number we needed for basic legal leverage. "You've all seen this notice. 70%. It's unconstitutional under our city ordinance. We have the power to stop it." A murmur, some hopeful, some cynical. "I've contacted the tenant union. We can file a temporary restraining order by tomorrow morning, but only if we present copies of every lease and signed statements from at least 5 of us detailing the unfair hike. Tonight, I need volunteers to gather those documents." Hands went up. Elena, Carlos, Mrs. Patel, the young couple. Jose nodded silently. I distributed affidavits, simple forms I'd templated, and instructed them to fill in their names, unit numbers, lease dates, and a brief description of their hardship. Then I passed around scrap paper for notes on where to find lease originals or photocopies. As they wrote, I paced, filling in paperwork for the legal aid clinic. My information, a summary of events, copies of our flyers. I emailed them to Callie, attaching the 7 affidavits as they trickled in. Half an hour later, watches clicked towards 7 o'clock. The sky was bruised purple. Our group was silent, but electric with purpose. Tomorrow morning, I told them, voice gentle but firm, we meet outside City Hall at 9 a.m. We'll hand in our paperwork together. If we stand united, they cannot ignore us. Mrs. Patel looked uncertain. What if they refuse? They can't, I said. Not if we meet the legal criteria. But even if they do, the media will pick up our story. We'll make noise. Elena clenched her pen. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I said, stepping close. But fear is the first sign we're doing something right. We'll be safe together. I promise. Carlos strummed a gentle chord on his guitar. Maybe a song, he said, half joking. A nervous laugh rippled through our group. I looked at each neighbor, faces lit by the last glow of day. They were scared, worn down by rent increases and rising costs, but here they were, ready to fight. My chest swelled with pride and something else, protectiveness, a fierce maternal impulse for this ragtag community. As twilight settled in, I rounded up the signed affidavits, 9 of them now, more than enough. I collected a few leases photocopied by volunteers. My bag felt heavy with printed pages and collective defiance. I closed the meeting with a final instruction: rest up. Tomorrow we march. We show up, lawyers beside us, press watching, unity behind us. We demand justice. They dispersed into the dusky night, determined smiles replacing the worry that had shadowed their faces when they arrived. I stayed behind, gathering papers, stacking chairs, and unplugging lights. The air was cool and fragrant with the promise of rebellion. Inside, I locked up the folder and tucked it into my desk drawer. I poured a glass of water, sat at my laptop, and wrote a brief post to the neighborhood Facebook group under a pseudonym. Neighbors, rent spiked 70%? Join us tomorrow 9 a.m. at City Hall. We stand together. I hit post and leaned back. My chest was tight, my mind buzzing. We'd gone from shock to strategy in less than 48 hours. Tomorrow would test us. The stubbornness of bureaucrats, the glare of reporters, the pushback from a landlord who wouldn't give up without a fight. But for the first time since that notice landed on my fridge, I felt something steadier than fear. I felt resolve, unyielding, gritty, and determined. I switched off my laptop and climbed into bed, staring at the ceiling as adrenaline slowly ebbed into exhaustion. Images flitted across my mind. Our small band of tenants, filing into City Hall in the morning light, Callie needing legal words into a document that might save our homes, the landlord's astonished face when he realized we weren't going to back down. Sleep came in start and stop drafts, but it came. And when it did, I dreamed of justice, slow, arduous, but attainable. Tomorrow, the fight would begin in earnest. And I would be there at the front, ready to lead. I dragged myself out of bed at 6:30, adrenal exhaustion chasing the last whispers of sleep from my bones. My legs felt leaden, but I forced them up and into the same jeans and leather jacket I'd worn yesterday, armor with a few scuffs now, but mine. I brewed coffee strong enough to strip paint, poured it into a thermos, and clipped Callie's case file to my tote. By 7:30, I was knocking on doors to collect any last-minute lease copies and affidavits. Carlos greeted me at Mrs. Patel's porch, holding a stack of freshly copied leases. His guitar was slung over his back like a battle standard. "Got these at the copy shop," he said, handing me the papers. "And I printed extra flyers. Maybe we find more tenants on the way." I nodded, grateful. "Thank you. We'll need every voice we can get." By 8:15, our caravan of 5 cars and a handful of bicycles rolled towards City Hall. The morning sun was fierce already, refracting off the new glass facade as if daring us to come forward. We parked across the street, a ragtag troop armed with legal paperwork instead of pitchforks. In my tote lay 9 affidavits, photocopies of 7 leases, a petition with 20 signatures, and a folder labeled Evidence, Unfair Rent Increase. We gathered on the curb, our faces set. Elena looked anxious, clutching her boy's hands. Mrs. Patel stood beside her walker, resolute, Jose held his eldest son's shoulder. Carlos nudged me. "Ready?" he whispered. "More than ever," I replied. We crossed to the grand marble steps and climbed toward the front doors. A pair of city security guards eyed us as we approached. I offered a polite nod, paper in hand. "City Hall," one of them said, nodding to the visitor's entrance. "Renters demonstration?" I held up our printed injunction request and Callie's letterhead. "Legal filing," I said. "May we proceed?" He scanned the documents and stepped aside to let us pass. Victory, however small, steamed in my veins. Inside, a clerk behind a counter glanced at our mound of paperwork. "What can I do for you?" she asked, voice brisk. I took a deep breath and laid out the folder. "I'm Mara Delgado, representing tenants of East 11th Street Complex. We're here to file a temporary restraining order against an unlawful 70% rent increase. We have 9 affidavits, lease copies, and supporting documentation." She adjusted her glasses, rifled through the papers, then tapped at her keyboard. "You're a few minutes early, but I'll process this." She stamped each affidavit with a municipal seal, slid them into a docket, and pressed a red submit button. "You'll get a confirmation number by email shortly. The judge will review it within 24 hours. I exhaled, relief and triumph swirling through me. "Thank you." Elena grabbed my arm. "It's really done?" "It's in motion," I said. But that's not the end. By 9:15, we spilled back onto the steps. Cameras and a reporter from the local paper, the Austin Daily, had gathered. I wasn't surprised. News of a 70% hike and a tenant uprising was too good to ignore. A young reporter thrust a microphone toward me. "Ms. Delgado, was this your initiative?" I squared my shoulders. It was ours, all of ours. As tenants, we refused to be pushed out of our homes overnight. Today we filed to prevent an illegal rent hike and to protect our community. The cameraman panned over the group, determined faces lit with morning sun. My chest tightened with pride and fear. But I leaned into the moment. "This is about more than rent," I said. "It's about dignity, fairness, and holding power accountable." They recorded every word. I even spotted a local radio crew scribbling notes. When we were done, I addressed my neighbors. "That coverage will help. Now let's get home, keep an eye on our inboxes, and prepare for tomorrow's court hearing. We win this, we stay. We lose, we take the fight to the streets." We dispersed in small knots, a little less raw, a little more resolute. By noon, the confirmation email arrived, case #ATX, 2025 CR 2395, temporary restraining order pending review. The landlord couldn't lawfully collect that extra rent until the hearing. I felt a surge of victory, but also a flicker of something darker. This landlord, Mr. Granger, had put the notice on my fridge with the cold efficiency of a vulture circling its prey. Now he'd met resistance, and vultures rarely tolerate interference. I knew he'd retaliate, but that knowledge sparked a deeper resolve. I would not only withstand his threats, I would dismantle his power piece by piece. By mid-afternoon, I began sketching the next phase of my plan. The legal route would likely delay the hike, but to permanently protect our community, we needed public pressure. I pulled out my phone and drafted a TikTok video script. "I'm Mara Delgado, and I've lived in my Austin bungalow for 7 years. Yesterday, my landlord tried to jack up my rent by 70% overnight. I'm not paying it, and neither should you. Tenants of East 11th unite." I added bullet points, footage of the notice, interviews with neighbors, a call to action #, #RentersRiseATX. I messaged Carlos, "Ready to record tonight?" He replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Next, I designed an email to local elected officials, City Council District 9, the Mayor's Office, and the Housing Commission. I attached our case number, details of the ordinance violation, and a plea for policy review to prevent such predatory hikes. I CC'd the tenant union and local legal aid. By 5, I'd also contacted a community organizer I'd met years ago at a rally, Anika Santos, now with the Texas Tenants Alliance. She responded almost immediately with, "I can bring a volunteer legal team next week, and I'll rally media contacts. Keep me posted." I sank into my kitchen chair, sipping lukewarm coffee, mind spinning. The day's events had been a whirlwind, from knockings at dawn to City Hall to media interviews to digital campaigning. My body ached, but my spirit thrummed with momentum. I glanced at the framed photo on my countertop, me and my BFF Laura on her wedding day, grinning in matching teal bridesmaid dresses. I hadn't told many people about this fight, but Laura, who lived in San Antonio, would understand. I texted her, "Big day. Temporary restraining order filed. PR rolling. Could use your voice today on social media? Hashtag Renters Rise ATX." Within minutes, her reply popped up on it, "Sister. Let's crush 'em." As dusk settled, my backyard again became our command post. Carlos set up his phone stabilizer. I taped the rent notice to the fence. Elena and Jose gathered neighbors for sound bites. Mrs. Patel practiced standing tall beneath the string lights. We recorded 3 short clips, my opening monologue, Elena describing her fear for her children's home, Jose decrying corporate greed in housing. We posted them under at East 11th Tenants, tagging the mayor and local news outlets. By 9, the first wave of likes and shares began flooding in. Strangers in Austin and beyond commented with support, solidarity. "My rent just went up 50%. How can I help?" Our hashtag trended locally by midnight. I collapsed onto the porch swing, hugging my knees. The night air smelled of jasmine and revolution. All at once, exhaustion crashed into me, mind, body, and soul screaming for rest. Yet, beneath the fatigue, a fierce joy burned. We were no longer victims. We were agents of change. Tomorrow dawned harsh and luminous. My phone buzzed with news alerts. Tenants protest grabs City Hall spotlight. Local nurse leads renters revolt. Temporary injunction filed. Hearing set for July 2nd. I stared at the headlines, chest swelling with satisfaction. This was only the beginning. I rocked gently on the swing, letting the currents of victory and anticipation wash over me. Mr. Granger, in his high-rise office, might tremble at the thought of a court hearing, but he couldn't hide from a mobilized, digital army of renters and allies. He couldn't silence the noise we'd generated, nor could he erase the solidarity we'd built. As the first faint light of dawn glinted on the fence, I rose, braced my feet on the wooden boards, and felt the ground firm beneath me. My body ached, my spirit soared, and my plan, both legal and public, was unfolding like clockwork. I closed my eyes and breathed deep. The fight was far from over, but we held the advantage now, the law, the media, and a community awakened. I gripped the railing and whispered to myself, gritty and determined, "Bring it on." I woke to sunlight slanting through the blinds at 6 a.m. My phone already buzzing with reminders. Court at 10, press conference at noon, team meeting at 3, TikTok live stream at 6. My body felt like a battleground veteran, sore, bruised by late nights and early mornings, but my mind was sharp, electrified by momentum. There was no room for hesitation. Every minute counted. I poured coffee into a travel mug and reviewed my notes at the kitchen counter. Today was the hearing for our temporary restraining order. If the judge denied us, we'd lose legal cover and our landlord could demand rent immediately. But with 9 affidavits, a petition signed by 20, and a growing media wave, I believed justice was on our side. By 8 a.m., I met Callie and our legal aid volunteers outside the courthouse. Callie, in her crisp navy suit, looked every bit the warrior lawyer. She greeted me with a determined smile. "I've prepared our arguments and exhibits. Let's show them the human cost of predatory hikes." Inside the courtroom's hushed foyer, we formed a line of tenants, the Patel family, the Martinez clan, Carlos with his guitar case, symbolic, he joked, and several new faces drawn in by our social media campaign. We passed small, laminated cards with our case number to sympathetic court staff and pressed hands for reassurance. At precisely 10 a.m., we were called in. The courtroom was a narrow chamber lit by high windows. Judge Ramirez presided from a raised bench. On the other side sat Mr. Granger's representative, a sleek landlord attorney with steely glasses. He glanced at us dismissively before burying his face in paperwork. Callie spoke first, outlining the ordinance. Austin Code 801.03 prohibits rent increases beyond the CPU rate. A 70% jump is flagrantly illegal. She laid out our evidence, signed leases, affidavits attesting to sudden financial peril, communications proving no prior notice beyond statutory minimums. When she finished, Judge Ramirez turned to me. "Ms. Delgado, you may address the court." I stood, feeling every eye in the room on me. My heart hammered, but my voice was steady. "Your Honor, I've lived in my home here on East 11th Street for 7 years. I work as a nurse, caring for people who can't afford care. I budget every penny to pay my rent. Yesterday, I opened my fridge and found this notice demanding I pay over $1,700 next month. That's not a hike, it's eviction by another name. If this increase goes through, I and dozens of my neighbors will be forced from our homes, our community shattered." I gestured to my fellow tenants. These people are not statistics. They are families. They are elders. They are artists and workers who contribute to the city. We ask for one thing: the right to remain in our homes under fair laws. A hush fell. Even the landlord's attorney looked unsettled. Judge Ramirez tapped his pen. "Thank you, Ms. Delgado. I will issue a temporary order preventing the landlord from collecting the increased rent until a full hearing. This protects your rights pending further review." He signed a slip of paper and handed it to Callie. Relief crashed through me so hard I swayed. Callie caught me, beaming. "We did it," she whispered. We filed the signed order with the clerk, making our victory official. Outside, the group erupted into joyous applause. Mrs. Patel wiped tears, Elena hugged her boys, Jose slapped my back. I looked at them, my community, and felt a fierce love burn in my chest. We had won the first battle. But I knew the landlord wouldn't stop there. As we filed out, I spotted Mr. Granger's attorney huddling with 2 security guards, pointing at us as we passed. A shot across our bows, he was gearing up for retaliation. Over the next hour, we convened a quick strategy huddle on the courthouse steps. Callie advised, "Stay vigilant. He may attempt to intimidate you, late-night lease notices, threats of eviction, small defaults. Document everything. We'll be ready to respond legally." I nodded. "And we amplify our story. Public pressure keeps him honest." I texted our media contacts, Judge Grant Stiero. Coverage appreciated. Next, full hearing on July 15th. By noon, I was in the small press room outside City Hall, flanked by tenants as we held an impromptu press conference. Flashbulbs popped, microphones hovered. My voice echoed. Today the court recognized our basic right to fairness. Let this be a warning. Tenants of Austin will not be bullied out of their homes. We demand affordable housing as a human right. Reporters scribbled notes, and cameras panned across the group. Ordinary people turned activists. Within hours, the online wave surged. Local news sites, neighborhood blogs, even a regional TV station ran segments. Our hashtag #RentersRiseATX trended statewide. I checked my phone. Messages of solidarity poured in, offers of pro bono legal aid, donations to our GoFundMe for printing costs, citizens pledging to attend our July 15th hearing. Back at my house in the early afternoon, I convened the command center. Carlos strummed quietly in the corner, adding a closing riff to a protest anthem we were writing. Callie and Anika joined me at the kitchen table, laptops open, planning next steps. "We need to shore up our case for the full hearing," Anika said. "We should bring in expert testimony, an economist to explain the rent spike's impact, a sociologist to speak on community displacement." She drafted an email to possible witnesses. Callie added, "Also, log every interaction with the landlord. If he cuts off utilities or tries to evict, we'll file motions immediately." She opened a shared folder labeled Evidence, Round 2. I looked around at this motley crew: lawyers, organizers, neighbors, artists turned activists. I felt pride so fierce it burned my throat. And I'll continue media outreach. Let's secure editorial endorsements from local papers. We can host a tenant public forum at the community center, invite city council members to speak. They nodded, enthusiasm crackling. We assigned tasks, set deadlines, and by 4:30 p.m. the plan was in motion. Legal prep, expert recruitment, media blitz, community forum planning, and social media content. That evening, I lay on my couch, exhaustion mingling with exhilaration. The house felt different now, like a war room after victory. I sipped herbal tea as wind rustled through the open window. I reflected on how far we'd come, from that morning shock at a taped notice to a court-sanctioned victory and a full civic engagement strategy within 4 days. But there was another layer to this fight, one more personal, one more vulnerable. I thought of Laura, my BFF, who'd been sharing posts and sending heartfelt messages. I texted her, "Thank you for being my voice in San Antonio. Means the world." Her reply, "Always, sis. Proud of you." Tears welled behind my eyes. This was more than a legal battle. It was a testament to community, friendship, and the belief that strangers and friends alike could join forces to protect what they held dear. As I drifted to sleep that night, I saw visions of Part 5, the landlord's final gambit, a courtroom showdown, a mass demonstration, and the ultimate triumph, or the hard-earned compromise, that would shape our futures. I clenched my fists in the dark, a warrior once more, ready for the next inevitable clash. Tomorrow would dawn with fresh challenges. But tonight, in this moment, I was reminded, when people refuse to bow, when they stand together with courage and grit, even the mightiest predators can be forced back. And no matter what Mr. Granger tried next, I would be there, frontline, unbroken, and determined to see justice done. The morning of July 15th arrived heavy with anticipation. As I stepped onto the courthouse steps, a crowd of 30 tenants and allies flanked me: artists, students, seniors, families. Our signs read "Homes Not Profits" and "Keep Austin Affordable." The air buzzed with chants: "No justice, no rent hike." I inhaled deeply, tasting solidarity. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Judge Ramirez presided again, flanked by stacks of legal briefs. Mr. Granger's attorney looked weary, his opening argument a recycled claim that the market justified any increase. He waved charts showing rising property values, but they meant nothing to families who couldn't eat or pay medical bills. Then Callie rose, her voice steady and impassioned. She called our expert economist, who testified that sudden rent spikes destabilize communities and push vulnerable residents into homelessness. Our sociologist spoke next: displacement fractures social bonds and burdens municipal services. Each witness laid another brick in our case, exposing the human cost. When it was my turn, I stood, heart pounding but voice unwavering. I described my trembling at that kitchen table on June 28th, how the notice had felt like a verdict. I spoke of Mrs. Patel's tears, Jose's fear for his children, the Martinez boys' confusion. I told the court we weren't asking for charity, only for fairness under the law. Judge Ramirez listened, eyes compassionate. He reviewed our evidence, the public forum turnout, the social media support that had spotlighted our plight. After a long pause, he delivered his ruling: the 70% rent increase was unlawful and void. Mr. Granger was ordered to revert all affected tenants to their prior rents and to negotiate any future increases in good faith and within legal limits. A surge of relief and triumph swept through me. My knees felt weak as neighbors cheered and embraced. Outside, cameras flashed, and our hashtag rekindled across feeds, #RentersWinATX. Walking home later, I passed the little yellow bungalow on East 11th Street. Inside, my tomatoes thrived on the back porch, and the sun still danced on the hardwood floors. I pressed my hand against the front door, feeling its familiar grooves. We defended more than a house. We defended dignity, community, and the right to belong. I exhaled a long breath, grit softened by pride. I was Mara Delgado, nurse, neighbor, and, above all, defender of home. And in that victory, I found a deeper truth: when we unite, even the fiercest battles can be won.